Well, hello and welcome to Restore UK. Restore UK going out live to the Restore UK on YouTube and also to the Twitter channel, which is Restore UK. I would just like to ask people on the YouTube channel, I mean, if you can share the link, that would be very, very helpful. And this evening we've got Ben Habib here to my
Cheers.
to that side. It's hard to tell because you're looking at the wrong side of the screen, and we've got Jamie Bryson down below us. And the reason why that I'd asked Ben, both Ben and Jamie, to come on, I mean, you might see in your news at the minute there's a lot of things going on with reference to the protocol. There seems to be a push to get unionists to accept something which would be absolutely detrimental if it is forced through in the way that the British government is intending that it would be forced through. So really what we wanted to do is we want to really talk about it, and we want to really try to relay it and relay to people that we only get one chance at this. If we get it wrong, it's goodbye the United Kingdom, and that's the reality. So we'll go around the screen here. As fact, we'll start at the bottom there, Ben, and then we'll work up to you. So, Jimmy, this morning on the Twitter sphere, let's just say, I didn't see the clip myself, but I did certainly see it that it was on Twitter. There was a comment from Doug Beattie. Now, as I say, I'm not over the detail of it. I did see the little clip. I don't have the clip here. And would you just like to tell me in your own words what it was that you seen and what was the implications of what Doug Beattie was actually saying, Jimmy?
Well, I think it was just another example of the Ulster Unionist Party demonstrating that they have no understanding at all about the constitutional impact of the protocol. Of course, Lord Trimble, who was the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party when they signed up to the Belfast Agreement, he said at that time, and probably one of the only things he said which was correct in 1998, was the act of union is the union. And of course, prior to last May's election, the present leader of the UUP, Doug Beattie, was asked on the Nolan show, is the act of union a red line, which can't be crossed? And he said no, that it wasn't, and come off for some waffle about the act of union being constantly changed. So clearly on a different page from David Trimble. And then this morning on Sunday Politics, firstly, he accepted the principle that there could be some form of checks, perhaps in data sharing, with the on the what he terms the green lane. And he also then said that he didn't view the protocol as a threat to the union. Now, only last week the government have put down a statutory instrument which implements Regulation 2017-625. Now, I would encourage everybody, go and read 2017-625. Article 64, paragraph 1 of that says that border control posts are to be placed at the entry point into the European Union. Now, the government are proposing to implement that at Northern Ireland, thus treating Northern Ireland as part of the European Union. That is alongside the act of union being subjugated, in the case Ben was involved in. Now, if the subjugation of the union, if treating Northern Ireland as a foreign country and part of the European Union isn't a threat to the union, then, I mean, what do the Ulster Unionist Party think a threat to the union is? And just finally, I mean, if you needed any more evidence of what a nonsensical this latest comment from Doug Beattie is, the first person out to support him was Stephen Farley of the Alliance Party. So I think when Alliance are out supporting you, you probably need to take a look in the mirror and ask where you're at.
And Jamie, just one comment from you again before we move on to Ben. But I mean, have you any reasoning for why do you think? I mean, is there any way that you can explain why that Doug Beattie would say such a thing?
Well, he doesn't understand it. Quite simply, he has no understanding of the complexities of the protocol or the constitutional implications of it. I mean, I've all the respect in the world for Doug Beattie in terms of his military service, and that'll never change. He served his country. He served his country with distinction. He was a hero in his military capacity. But when it comes to politics, the Ulster Unionist Party are clueless, and they do not understand the constitutional impact of the protocol, and their weakness is an absolute threat to the union, because they're the only ones here who are consistently trying to cross the unionist picket line, get back into the executive. And there was a case recently, JR 1813 and Rooney, which was the Edwin Poots checks case, essentially. And the High Court made clear, if you're in the Northern Ireland Executive, you have to implement the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, this is a question the Ulster Unionists can't answer. Will they implement the protocol? Because that is the logical outcome of them saying that they will be in the Executive. And if the answer to that is, well, we'll see how negotiations go, we can have talks in parallel, then the question for the Ulster Unionists is, well, how long would you temporarily implement the protocol as part of an Executive? And if there's a time limit on how long you would do it, and then you would collapse the Executive, well, how can you say that collapsing the Executive isn't a legitimate tactic? So, I mean, the Ulster Unionists are just all over the place. They've become irrelevant, and I think we haven't had an election because the NIO know that the Ulster Unionists would be absolutely wiped out, as unionism would collectively get behind the DUP and TUV and send them back with an even stronger mandate to say that it's power sharing of the protocol, but you'll never have both.
Yeah, I mean that's a very fair comment at the end there, Jimmy. And Ben, I mean, would you just like to relate to the people? I mean, does the protocol interfere with the United Kingdom?
Well, I mean, undoubtedly it interferes with the United Kingdom. We've had 2 court rulings saying that British citizens in Northern Ireland are not on an equal footing with British. When I get on a plane and fly from London to Belfast, I cease to have the rights that I had in London. You know, that's a constitutional interference. I'm subject to laws made in a foreign country, foreign place, by a foreign power. I'm subject to a foreign court. You know, what is that if that is not interference in our own union? And the government, as Jamie knows very well, you know, the government has been in court a few times arguing that Northern Ireland should be treated as a foreign country when it comes to interpreting, you know, its relationship with Great Britain. And so, of course, there's absolute constitutional interference here. And I think what's really interesting, Jamie's, I don't want to get caught in a debate with the UUP. I don't think there's much value in it for unionism. But what's interesting to me in this is that I think the problem with the UUP stance isn't as innocent as Jamie described it as. You know, Jamie said that they don't really know the constitutional impact of the protocol. But I suspect they do know the constitutional impact of the protocol, but they are captured by devolution. And Doug Beattie and his MLAs only have a voice if Stormont is up and running.
Yeah.
And through Stormont, they gain their position. And it's devolution that has weakened their resolve and their commitment to the protocol. And it's a great shame because local politics is bound to damage the country, isn't it? You know, when you give parliamentarians a platform to speak of their provincial interests only and ignore, in effect, what's important for the entire country, then you are going to damage the union. And so this damage started a long, long time ago. And the pronunciations from Doug Beattie this morning, I think, just confirm and evidence that devolution is a bad idea in the United Kingdom.
Sorry, I was muted myself there. But on that prospect of, let's say, having devolution, I mean, whenever we see that the British government are coming in again and they're proposing actually installing border checks at Larne, at Belfast and Warren Point, really over the heads of unionists, I mean, can we really say, Jamie, that devolution works under such circumstances?
Well, what the protocol has exposed is, number one, as we discussed the last time on your programme, the fundamental basis upon which unionism supported power sharing and devolution was ostensible consent. Like, nobody can seriously argue that that hasn't been exposed as a deception. Even the most pro-agreement campaigners, Billy Hutchison, David Trimble, Jim Wilson, all of these people who argued for the agreement in 1998 have been honest enough to their credit to say, look, we were duped. It was a deception. So devolution is unsustainable on that footing alone. But what is the point of the devolution system we have, whereby every time that unionism seeks to reach for the safeguards are disapplied? So when nationalism were in the minority, when they needed cross-community protections and safeguards, those safeguards were a fundamental, you think Moses brought them down on the tablet. But the very first time that nationalism, along with their useful idiots in Alliance, thought that they had a majority to put the foot on the neck to subjugate the unionist people, all of a sudden the safeguards across community consent wasn't important anymore. And nationalism, who
they were disapplied, actually, Jamie, weren't they?
Yeah,
it wasn't that
yeah.
they weren't, but they were actually disapplied.
They were disapplied. And what's interesting is nationalism, who want the United Ireland, who say that we can't have direct rule from Westminster, are more than happy for Westminster to legislate, so long as they're legislating, putting their foot on the neck of unionism. So when it comes to abortion, when it comes to the Irish Language Act, when it comes to the protocol, Sinn Féin, SDLP and Alliance all of a sudden love Westminster. And they want to talk about parliamentary sovereignty and how fabulous it all is. But Ben's right. And I wrote a bit about this in the Centre for the Union paper. The fundamental mistake that unionism made was conceding that the principle of consent and the principle of self-determination was an issue for Northern Ireland alone. That was always a mistake. The United Kingdom should be treated as one country, and the principle of self-determination should be a principle applicable to the whole United Kingdom. So if there's to be a vote to dissolve the union, that should be a vote for the whole union. And Sir John Laws writes about this in the Scottish vote. He says, it's profoundly undemocratic that one constituent part of the union, a minority part, can dissolve the union. So unionism made a fundamental mistake in acceding to that. It's a long way back, but we shouldn't be ashamed of making the argument to say no, that self-determination should be a matter for the whole United Kingdom, and that should be something that unionism should aim towards, and an achievement to try and get to. But devolution, I agree with Ben, and actually he makes a good point about the Ulster Unionist. I hadn't thought of it that way before, but when he puts it like that, it's I have to say, a compelling point.
Yeah, that's definite. So Ben, before that we move on to really something that we want to talk about, focus on. There was a document came out on Monday, and it was from the let's get this right, Centre for the Union, Jimmy. That's right. Yeah. And I have to say, I read the document in full, and in fact I went over it a few times, and I have to say I was largely, I could buy into it, and I'm known as the type of person that doesn't buy into much these days. But I have to say, I could have bought into that document, and I like some of the principles that were in it, and we'll go on and we'll talk about it. But Ben, before that we move on to that document, I think maybe you would be the man best placed on this screen to answer this. Is Rishi Sunak trying to hive us off? Would he hive us off tomorrow if he had the chance, Ben?
Before I answer that question, I just want to say I'm full of admiration for Jamie's commitment to actually analyse these issues and come up with constructive proposals which would, alleviate the impact of the protocol. And, it takes a great deal of personal commitment to do it, because some of us are so enraged, and I don't imagine Jamie is immune to rage on this subject, so enraged by the constitutional self-harm that's being visited on the United Kingdom that, we don't want to come up with constructive solutions. We just want to say, no, throw this thing out, ditch it, burn it. We go back to where we were, if necessary. And I know, John, you'd be in agreement with this, pre-1998. Let's go back to pre-1998. Jamie, hats off to you. But on Rishi Sunak wouldn't hesitate to sell Northern Ireland down the drain if there wasn't the opposition within Northern Ireland and the electorate at large. It's not even a matter of selling this to the Tory party. The Tory party will take the knee to the protocol. The Tory party's already taken the knee to the protocol. The reason you've got the protocol is because Boris Johnson foisted it on the country with his 80-seat majority. So if you think there's any defense in the European Research Group, the so-called Spartans of Brexit, who might be expected to look out for the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, forget it. Chris Heaton-Harris and Steve Baker were out there amongst these Spartans, and actually they are campaigning vigorously for the implementation of the protocol, taking steps against the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, there's not a force in Westminster that wouldn't hesitate to make the protocol set in stone. They can't do it because the electorate now is wise to what's going on. The electorate in Northern Ireland in particular is wise to what's going on. And to his credit, Sir Geoffrey has busted Stormont, and he will not give in. So Geoffrey has painted, he's pinned his colours to a flag, and he's not going to budge. He can't budge, frankly. It would be political suicide now for the DUP to change its position. The 5th of May election was fought on making sure the protocol went. You can't have Stormont or the protocol. That was the line. If you want Stormont, the protocol's got to go. And so Geoffrey, I think, is going to stay absolutely true to that. And there was skepticism, I think, at the beginning about the DUP's commitment, but he stayed strong. And I think he will stay strong. So Rishi can do whatever he wants. Cleverly can do whatever he wants. They can take the knee to the European Union. They can agree to open up sensitive British internal trading information to the EU, something which no semi-sensible sovereign state would do to a foreign power. They can do it, but they're not going to win this battle. They are not going to win this battle.
Yeah, just an interesting point there, sorry, John, on Baker. About a year ago, they tried to start amending laws in GB through the TNDU law to change the definition of the United Kingdom to being Great Britain only and excluding Northern Ireland. Steve Baker led the charge to try and get that stopped, saying that this was constitutionally outrageous. I must go and find his speech. It was fabulous. Now we have Steve Baker, the NIO minister, and I don't know what's happened to Steve Baker. If ever there's an example of what they call capture, it's Steve Baker. Now he's part of the NIO. The government are putting down regulations to treat Northern Ireland as part of the EU. And I say it again, please, people, I'll put it on my Twitter later. Article 64, paragraph 1 of 2017-625. Border control posts are built at the entry point into the European Union. So when the government are putting down statutory instrument to empower the implementation of that, they are accepting that Northern Ireland is part of the European Union, and that's untenable. And where is the Steve Baker that was standing giving a passionate speech whenever they tried to do this a year ago? What has happened to that, Steve Baker?
So this is my view, for what it's worth, Jamie. Steve Baker was never true to the arguments he made. Rishi Sunak was never true to Brexit when he said he was a Brexiteer. This was for political positioning. A lot of what these people do, they do it for political positioning. So it's almost flattering him to say that the Northern Ireland office has captured him. It's almost flattering. No, all he's done is show his true colours, that he is the ultimate politician. He'll say what he needs to say, given his particular position at the time. Now he's a minister. He's ditched the idea. He's got a position in government. That's what Steve Baker wanted. So to hell with the ideology, to hell with what, that speech. He doesn't really believe in much. And that's the problem. We have a Conservative Party which is ideologically devoid. It's devoid of ideology. It is supremely pragmatic in one thing and one thing alone, which is gaining power and then holding it, and actually not knowing what to do with the power when they get it.
I wrote a piece some years ago, way before lockdown, and I remember thinking it was the corporate straw that would actually break the Conservative Party. So the corporate straw that would break the Conservative Party, and I believe the Conservative Party, they're operating their political party like a corporate, in where that they're trying to invite as much footfall into the party as possible, and as a result, they're all pulling in different directions, Ben. And then we have the top of the Conservative Party right now, in order to have the jobs that they want, well, they're prepared to jump ship. And that's just what I see with, and I'm glad that the two of you talked about both Chris Heaton-Harris and Steve Baker on that subject, because they were meant to be defenders, defending the same thing as we are defending, and will continue to defend. So, Jimmy, we want to move on to your document. Sorry. I just thought I'm going to mute just for 2 seconds. We had a wee bit of feedback there. So we want to move on to your document, Jamie. We're going to put your document up here. I'm saying it was written by yourself, Jamie, if I'm right here, and it says here Ethan Thoburn. And I think Ethan was one of the youngest Conservative chairmen, wasn't he, in the country? I mean, he ran a Conservative Party. I don't know what the name is for it, but a constituency up around the northeast of England. And he's a very, very young man, and he's a wise head and very, very young shoulders. And that's how I see Ethan. So, look, again, we're talking to the live chat here. Restoring Northern Ireland's place in the Union, Centre for the Union, Constitutional Studies Group. And whenever I read this, I think there was 84 pages in it from my recollection. And what I really want to do, Jim, is I want to just focus on this bit here on table of contents, part 3, where it would say that the proposed way forward. Now, a bit of commentary that I would give is that whenever I read it, I found it to be a very, very clever document. A document in that look, if the Conservative Party really want to solve this problem, I believe that this document gives them the way of solving the entire Brexit situation and putting us all back to a place where we're not fighting at each other and we can get on with the day-to-day politics. Now, I, as a unionist, as a Northern Ireland unionist, I realise that if this protocol persists, well, I will ultimately end up out of the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland will end up out of the United Kingdom. And in fact, by extension, the entire United Kingdom will actually break up. So the proposals that are there at the minute, I don't like any of them, the way that they're proposing green lanes, red lanes, regulatory and customs checks. They're proposing that there would be trusted trader schemes, and we're still linked to the EU, all of that. But this document provided a way in which that it would have sidestepped all of that. And in my honest belief, it would have given everybody exactly what they wanted. And I would even say, what political party couldn't accept what's in here? Because in this document, and we're coming to you, Jamie, and you can sort of explain it in a second, but in this document, I like the idea of a thing called a tunnel. And I'm asking the people on the live chat to picture in your mind's eye a tunnel that has been fed into from right around the United Kingdom, England, Scotland, and Wales, and Northern Ireland. And if anybody wants to trade with the EU, well, what they can do is effectively they can insert their goods into this tunnel and they can make their declarations at the tunnel point in where that it removes the need for any customs or regulatory checks right around the United Kingdom. And any goods coming to Northern Ireland from England, Scotland, and Wales and back the other way, well, then they're left free to do that in exactly the way that they should actually be done. So, Jamie, would you just like to explain in a nutshell the document? And I know that you're not here for long, so just in a nutshell, in your own way, if you would like to go over the content of that document and tell people some key points, please.
Yeah, well, suppose I'll deal with this in 3 parts. So if I forget a part, do remind me. I'll deal first with the EU law point. Then I'll deal with the tunnel, and finally I'll deal with the UK constitutional bill, which we proposed. So keep me right which order I'm going in. Firstly, in regards to EU law, you see the fundamental problem always here is that Northern Ireland is left part of the EU customs territory instead of the UK customs territory. That Northern Ireland by default has to follow EU laws we don't make, laws we can't change. And I think I put it like this the last time that I was on. The protocol and all of the EU law which it applies through it comes from an international treaty. Section 7A of the European Union Withdrawal Act. If you think of it like a conduit pipe, it all comes automatically down the pipe. It bypasses Parliament, it bypasses the Northern Ireland Assembly, and it's automatically imposed upon the people of Northern Ireland. So that is a conduit pipe through which the European Union feed in laws which are imposed upon one constituent part and only one constituent part of the United Kingdom. So our proposal is this. The EU laws which apply at the minute, so well, to put this in a proper context, on exit day, what happened, because there's thousands, or I think maybe 4,000 or 5,000 more pieces of EU law in our domestic regime. So to avoid chaos when the United Kingdom left, what happened was a concept called retained EU law, which meant that EU law, which was applicable in the United Kingdom, was effectively copy and pasted into domestic law. It was called retained EU law, which meant it could only then be changed by Parliament or in some aspects it evolved administrations, but it was no longer European Union law. It became domestic law. But in Northern Ireland, it was different because the European law continued to apply. So what we propose is this, that the EU law which applies in Northern Ireland, insofar as that it is the same as applies in Great Britain, would equally be copy and pasted as retained EU law into domestic law. Now that would be necessary to keep Northern Ireland aligned with the United Kingdom, paradoxically, because what Great Britain has done in terms of the retained EU law bill, if we just ended all EU law at 12 midnight tonight in Northern Ireland, we would actually be left in a massive vacuum, and we would still be different from the United Kingdom because they would have the TNDU law, which we wouldn't have. So we would copy and paste that which matches GB, and that would form part of the United Kingdom domestic law. If there's any other specific aspects of EU law which differ, which we would like to adopt, for example, single electricity market, perhaps vehicle standards, then the flexibility is there to do that, but only with the cross-community consent of the Northern Ireland Assembly. And we propose that if a measure is adopted by the Northern Ireland Assembly, which at the point it's adopted, it matches Great Britain, but going forward, there's some form of divergence, then two ways to prevent that is there's a sunset clause, which means that you again have to take a new vote in order for it to still apply, which requires cross-community consent. And also, as we'll get to in the constitutional bill, a Minister of the Crown would be prohibited from doing any act which would impinge upon the Acts of Union. So very succinctly, that's how we deal with the EU law aspect. In terms of the EU tunnel, in terms of the trading, what we propose is this. Those who wish to trade into the European Union through the Republic of Ireland entry point would be required as a matter of law to opt in to a scheme whereby they would have to comply with full EU requirements in order to do that, full customs declarations, and you opt into that tunnel. And then you comply with that, and of course the two lanes proposal that the government have is it's back to front, because you have to opt in via a trusted trader scheme to trade in your own country, but by default you're in the red lane. So we totally turn that upside down. You are by default free to move without any customs declarations whatsoever. But if you're exporting to the European Union and you haven't opted into the tunnel, then you can be subject to criminal penalties. Now, what we say is this, and this it was actually Ben who has been championing this point for a long time. And what we then say is, if the European Union want additional protection over and above the criminal penalty regime which we have proposed, if they want additional protection, then they can deploy their own proposal, which was Smart Border 2.0, to conduct those compliance checks on the land border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, and that would be a matter for them. So you would have an open land border, unless the EU wanted otherwise. You would have absolutely no checks whatsoever on anything going Great Britain to Northern Ireland, and technology would be used to ensure people are complying with the opt-in scheme, and that could include in-market surveillance. So that, in my mind, would square the circle. Finally, then, we propose a 4-clause, what we call the UK Constitutional Bill. At the moment, Section 7A of the European Union Withdrawal Act is supreme over all law, including a constitutional statute like the Act of Union. Our bill would put the Act of Union, 1707, 1800, would make it supreme in domestic law, which means that every other part of domestic law has to be read subject to the Acts of Union. We would make it unlawful for any Minister of the Crown to do any act, such as laying a statutory instrument or regulations which creates an incompatibility with the Act of Union. We would amend Section 1 of the Northern Ireland Act to say that the principle of consent and Northern Ireland's position within the United Kingdom, encompassed within that, is the Act of Union. So put simply, when it comes to the Union, you can't change everything but the last thing being merely the final formal handover of sovereignty, or as Jim Allister puts it, you can't salami slice the Union. And finally, then, we would make Section 7A of the European Union Withdrawal Act subject to, and to be read as always having been subject to, the UK Constitutional Act, and thus the Acts of Union. And that would essentially reverse the Court of Appeal. It would reverse the High Court, and if the Supreme Court rules against us, in that case, it would reverse that as well by legislation. But the simple point is, we would make the foundational constitutional law of the United Kingdom supreme, and the European Union Withdrawal Act and every other provision would yield to that, rather than the outrageous situation at the minute where the Act of Union is subjugated with the foot of the European Union on its neck, and that's not tolerable for any self-respecting country. So that's a very quick, in a nutshell. And just quickly on the centre of the Union, massive credit to Ethan. He is the administrator for it. He is the director, and he's worked very hard to pull it together. Myself and Ben along with Pearl Garvin, Lord Moylan, Kate Hoy, Ian Paisley, Jim Allister, and numerous others, a number of barristers and professionals across the UK, attended and spoke at his launch in Parliament, and it was a fabulous event. So the Centre for the Union is a very important vehicle going forward. It has exciting plans. I'm certainly delighted to be involved in it, and it's all credit to Ethan, who's very much been the driving force behind the idea.
Yeah, and what I'm looking for here is, and again, Ben, we'll go over to you with this one, but before our eyes here, we see a bill, and could you just tell us about that bill, Ben? Do you know about it? Yeah. Sorry, my fault.
That's been is this Jamie's draft bill? Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, as I said, I applaud Jamie for his efforts, and it is important that the Unionist side, I suppose, make an effort, because it shows the detractors and those who would say that we are kind of stuck in a siege mentality and unopen to new ways of operating and so on, that's not the case. But and I think that's great. But ultimately, you know, where this goes is so hard to predict. And I just see intransigence on both sides. So it's great that Jamie's got this idea and everything, and the other side would look at it. I mean, equally, you could have, you know, just that smart border and say, sod off. We're not doing anything, you know, as accommodating as what Jamie's drafted. But what was your specific point, John, on
Jimmy, Jim, if you could tell us, Jimmy, about there was a bill that was being drafted which would have really solidified and copper fastened the union in terms of it would have give rights right around the United Kingdom. Jimmy, could you tell us a wee bit about that? You just mentioned a bit about it there.
The UK constitutional bill.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, this bill would have made the Acts of Union supreme. It would have restored the Acts of Union, and it would have made it a minister of the Crown couldn't do anything, any act which is incompatible with the Acts of Union. And it's strange because the Human Rights Act has that status. So a public authority can't act in a manner which is incompatible with any of the convention rights. But a public authority or a minister by regulations can act incompatibly with the Acts of Union, and that to me just seems to be extraordinary. And I have to say, I remember, goodness, I lose track of years now, but way back at the very outset of all of this, when the first withdrawal agreement was published, I initiated the first legal pre-action letter and was drafting the letter, and my points are very much around cross-community consent, you know, failure to consult, all of these concepts. And before I sent it, I sent it to Jim Allister and said, look, any points? And from the very outset, he came back, he says, I would add in the Act of Union. I went, right, okay. And that's where all this started. And to go back to that point, I mean, Jim spotted this point when to be fair, nobody else did. Nobody in Parliament did. Nobody considered it. To be fair, none of us involved in the campaign leading up before the meaningful votes and before it was passed. None of us had spotted this point, and Jim did. So I think it's important to credit Jim with that. But now that we have identified the point and we have developed it and we have worked on it over the last number of years, I think it's very important for unionism to hold fast to it, because it's a very, very simple message. The Act of Union is the union. Yeah. And it's those principles we must maintain. And an example I gave at the Centre for the Union talk was the Acts of Union creates Parliament. Article 3 of the Act of Union creates Parliament. Now, if I come on here tonight and proposed and said, look, I think we should subjugate Article 3 of the Acts of Union, we should have an authoritarian state, and we should do away with parliamentary democracy, people would say, well, that is constitutionally improper. You can't do that. Now, you may well be able to do it in exercise of parliamentary sovereignty, but there's a difference between something being legal and something being constitutional, and people haven't understood this particular distinction. So the question I would pose is this: if Article 3 of the Acts of Union is beyond any change or challenge because it's a constitutional fundamental, why is Article 6 of the Act of Union to be afforded a lesser status? What is the line to be drawn between those two provisions? And quite simply, there is none.
Yeah,
there is none.
And
the
Ben,
courts have taken a very legalistic attitude to the Act of Union and Article 6 in particular. I mean, what Jamie rightly points out is there's a constitutional aspect of this which overrides the law. There would be no parliament if it wasn't for the Acts of Union. So it's a complete nonsense. And I hope the Supreme Court, which is still considering the position, I hope that it will, come down on the right side. I don't have much expectation of doing the right thing, but I do hope that they will.
Yeah, indeed. And I want to just quickly touch on what it is that we see happening before our very eyes. I mean, we're seeing a big push at the minute to get the parties to agree to something. Now, I'm going to take you back slightly a couple of years to the end of December in 2019. There was a general election that was coming. The DUP were put forward as the party that everybody should support to be representing as leaders of the union. Now, they soon after that election, whenever they got elected, they lost a few seats. In the round, they done pretty well. They then went on to sign a thing called the New Decade New Deal document. Now, that document was prepared by Northern Ireland Secretary of State, the then Secretary of State, and by Simon Coveney, the Foreign Minister of the Irish Republic. Now, the document was presented to the parties, and it was on a take it or leave it basis, and it so happened that the parties actually signed up to it. Now, I see the same sort of choreography going on right now with reference what we seen last week at the end of the week, with everybody arriving in, the world and its dog, so to speak, and they're trying to get a consensus in where something that everybody could support. But what I see and what I fear is that it's going to be a huge compromise, and we've really nothing left to compromise on, is the thing. Now, what the government seem to be proposing is that they seem to be proposing that there would be, again, it's this thing called the landing zone. Green lanes, red channels, customs and regulatory checks in both channels, by the way, whether that be green or red, a trusted trader scheme. Okay, they might maybe remove some of this here. They might change some language. But in essence, I really see what was being touted as this landing zone that everyone had been talking about. And it's Doug Beattie. He actually claimed to be the architect of this landing zone. He claimed to sell it to the EU, to the Dublin government, and to the Americans, and he said that they were all happy with it. Now, I can tell you that this landing zone of which I speak would be in the Alliance Party manifesto. So if the Alliance Party claim that they don't support it, well, I don't know what it's in their manifesto for. Now, what I fear is, I was listening to Katie Hayward just a few days ago, and I've gone back and I've listened to this over and over again. And she has talked about that the Katie Hayward and other people, they met. Now, that's Katie Hayward. She's part of the George Mitchell Institute for Global Peace, and she's at Queen's and so on. And she claims to have met with James Cleverly and with the Maroš Šefčovič of the European Union. And she basically, in my honest opinion, or in my interpretation, she would have laid out how that things are going to unfold. And if Katie was right, they're going to come back tomorrow after being away for a few days. And my fear is that they're going to present a document on a take it or leave it basis, just like the what happened in New Decade, New Deal. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm reading Katie Hayward wrong. And to the live chat, what I will do is I'll give my rationale on a further video, and I'll show and I'll play the audio and show exactly why I said that. Jimmy, I know that you've got to go. So, Jimmy, would you just like to talk about if that there is a deal done with the protocol still in place, with red and green channels, if there's going to be that sort of a system, is the union safe under that system, Jimmy?
No, the channels and the border control posts are building the gallows for the union, and it doesn't matter whether it's a red channel, a green channel, or call it whatever you want. You're building the gallows for the union, and you're implementing the destruction of the union. The key test has to be this: Northern Ireland has to be on an equal footing with the rest of the United Kingdom. There can be no EU law applicable to Northern Ireland. We're not part of the European Union, sorry, and therefore we should not be subject to European Union law. We should be subject to United Kingdom law only, and the jurisdiction, the ultimate legal jurisdiction, must be the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. So the key principle is this: if you're bringing a good from Glasgow to Manchester, the same system must apply if you're bringing that from Glasgow to Belfast. So there cannot be a difference made in relation to Northern Ireland. I don't want Northern Ireland to be equal footing means equal footing. That means in no better nor worse position. So that means Northern Ireland can't have privileged access to the EU market. That's why we propose that the EU tunnel has to be accessible to all of the United Kingdom, not just Northern Ireland. And it wouldn't make any sense to only be accessible to Northern Ireland because the goods are coming from GB via Northern Ireland. But on NDNA, fatal mistake by the DUP to agree to NDNA. They actually thought they got something in the document when it talked about unfettered access. But if you actually look at it, it's unfettered access NI to GB, not the other way around. So it's a clever.
And even that's questioned, by the way, Jamie.
Yeah.
It's gone unnoticed, largely unnoticed. But last July, the EU required checks from NI to GB. That's gone quiet.
Yeah.
But it is out there. It is out
Yeah,
there.
that's what the protocol ultimately would require once you remove all
Absolutely.
As well. Now, it wouldn't be as stringent as the other way, but stringent nevertheless. It would be. Northern Ireland would be totally. The protocol is designed to put Northern Ireland into an economic united Ireland. And if I just say this to your viewers, just obviously I said to you, I'm not being rude. I do have to go for childcare, but a legal case has been launched this week against the regulations. And this legal case will expose one fundamental issue. Article 4 of the protocol says Northern Ireland is part of the customs territory of the United Kingdom. Now, that is incompatible with the assertion in 2017-625, Article 64, paragraph 1, that the entry point to the European Union is where the border control posts are, because that means Northern Ireland is treated as part of the
We seem to have lost Jamie there, Ben. Ben, and maybe if you could just sort of pick up on that. And, again, as a unionist, Ben, would you recommend that any unionist would sign up to anything if it keeps the act of the union disapplied?
Well, I think we can trust. The key thing here is that we trust the DUP not to reform Stormont. That's the key thing. And I trust Sir Geoffrey to stand firm. I totally trust him. And he's repeated throughout the last week, when all this mood music was ramping up, that he's got 7 points. He disclosed those 7 points last year. If they're met, then he's fine. If they're not met, he's not reforming Stormont. But here's the thing. And this is, if you're going to cut any clip, John, and tweet it or want to tweet it, cut what I'm about to say. The only way for this problem to be resolved in favor of a strong United Kingdom is if Sir Geoffrey and the DUP start, first of all, ditch the Conservative Party as allies and bring their fight for unionism to Great Britain. They've got to stop relying on the Conservative Party to do the right thing, and they've got to challenge the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom. They've got to come to Great Britain, cease being a provincial party, and become a pan-United Kingdom party, and contest seats right across the United Kingdom, and take votes away from the Conservative Party. The only way to get the Tory party to do the right thing is if they're electorally threatened. As I mentioned earlier, they're ideologically devoid. The only thing they fear is losing office. So he has to. One of the problems I've got with unionism is it's in siege in Northern Ireland, and it's got these huge existential threats with which it's dealing, which makes it very difficult for unionism to be on the front foot. Well, this is my message to Sir Geoffrey. Get on the front foot, come to Great Britain, stand in great British seats across England and in Scotland, look at Wales as well, challenge the Tories in their backyard and fight them electorally in the United Kingdom. If the DUP do that, and let me tell you, there's a lot of support for the values of the DUP in England. We don't have them in the Tory party. The DUP stand for a lot of things that centre-right politicians and businessmen and the electorate in this country want. The red wall voters in England want DUP policies. So stop being a provincial party, come to Great Britain, and let's have a bloody good crack at the Tory party.
Well said, Ben. And Jamie, I know that you're going. So again, if this current deal goes through, Jamie, green and red channels, protocols still in place. Can the act of the union be resurrected under such a system? And if it's not resurrected, if it can't be resurrected, what's the implications of that, Jamie?
Well, the implications have to be that there will never again be power sharing, devolution in Northern Ireland with unionism involved. And that's why, and as I said earlier, I have deep disagreements with Doug Beattie politically, deep disagreements. I think the Ulster Unionist Party are pathetically weak, but I have the utmost respect for the man, for his military service, and nobody could ever call that into question. So I do respect Doug Beattie for that, and that is why I say to him, please stop crossing the unionist picket line. Please stop undermining the cause of the union, because being in the executive means you must implement the protocol, and no self-respecting unionist can implement the protocol. And certainly, and you're a lot older than me, John, and so is Ben and many other people. But I can say in my lifetime, I have never seen such unity across unionism, loyalism, grassroots unionism and loyalism, the Orange Order, the marching bands, the DUP, the PUP, the TUP.
And Jamie, you're supported in England.
Yeah, and across England and Scotland and Wales, all of the support that we have, and the only people who are saying within the unionist family that unionism should go back and implement the protocol is the Ulster Unionist Party. And why are they doing it? Why are they doing it? And a man like Doug Beattie, who sacrificed so much for the United Kingdom, and such bravery, such courage, such a distinguished military record, I don't believe for 1 minute that Doug Beattie actually wants to be weak on the union, actually wants to surrender the union. I think he just is being badly advised by people around him who have no idea what they're talking about. So I plead with the Ulster Unionist Party, the party of James Craig and Lord Carson. Stand firm with the rest of the unionist family. Stop this nonsense. Stop undermining your friends, and stick with us, and let's all stand together to get rid of this protocol, which is the greatest threat that the United Kingdom has ever faced, and certainly Northern Ireland has ever faced since 1912.
And on that note, Jamie, no doubt you're going, but I want you to hear this before you go. A quote from Edward Carson of just over 100 years ago: "When is a unionist not a unionist? When he causes disunion." That's what the Doug Beattie and co are actually doing, because as you just pointed out, there's a union right across the broad spectrum of unionist support in Northern Ireland. And that's a very, we don't get that all the time, but we've got it on the protocol. So Jamie, if you're going, thank you very much for coming along. And Ben, I would like, thank you.
Thanks,
thank you, Jamie. And Ben, I would like to just talk to you for the last 10 minutes, Ben, on, the Conservative Party in general, how things that are going on in England, how that it is that they're hemorrhaging support from their voter base, and how that it is that there's an up-and-coming party along with Richard Tice and the Reform Party. Would you just like to give us, in your words, what's happening in England and what the Reform Party could potentially do at the next general election?
Okay, so what's happening in England? The Labour Party and the Conservative Party are both antipathetic to the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Neither can be trusted, that's for sure. The only voice for unionism actually is from the DUP in Westminster. But, as I mentioned earlier, the electorate in England, and to a lesser extent, I'm just being frank, lesser extent Scotland and Wales, but there's firm support for unionism in England. There's firm support for the values that the DUP hold in England. Those values and policies are very similar to what Richard Tice is standing for and what Reform has, been publishing. So there is a definite overlap there. But the Tories right now, I'm on a few Tory chats, and the Tories right now fear for their political existence. They see themselves being down at less than 100 seats after the next election. And what they want is the most expedient way to improve that. But what we've got to do is make sure they continue to feel the DUP's breath down the back of their neck. And the only way to do that is for Sir Geoffrey and the DUP to come to England and to come to Great Britain and threaten the Tory seats. Can you imagine, if they're facing less than 100 seats already, how much they would fear the DUP coming in? Because that might render them with only 20 or 30 seats. That doesn't mean the DUP necessarily will win seats in England, but it will be strong enough to take votes from the Tories. And what they fear more than anything is losing an election. So if we want the Tory party to pivot and eventually deliver what their name suggests, which is, being the Unionist party, then we've got to threaten them electorally in England. Richard Tice is a great Unionist. Richard Tice believes in all the same values as I mentioned, but the imagery and the impact of the DUP emerging from Northern Ireland, ceasing to be a provincial party, becoming a pan-United Kingdom party, and taking on Westminster will be phenomenal. And let me tell you, I think there will be Tory MPs who will immediately defect to the DUP if they knew the DUP operated in Great Britain. And this is the challenge that now Sir Geoffrey has to take up. We've got to stop being under siege mentality. We've got to stop thinking of Northern Ireland as an independent fight, separate from the UK. This is about the United Kingdom as a whole. Unionism has to emerge from Northern Ireland, a bit like the way Christianity emerged from Ireland and from the west coast of Scotland when it was lost in Europe during the Dark Ages. Unionism needs to emerge from Northern Ireland and bring it back to Great Britain. We've got to turn secular, if you like, Great Britain into an active believer in the union, where union policies are promoted, where they're so entrenched in Westminster that they'll never be trampled on. And that's what we've really got to do. And so my message to Sir Geoffrey, I don't know which bit of this you're going to cut. I do hope you'll cut some of it and tweet it. I really want Sir Geoffrey to take on the challenge of coming to the United Kingdom. After all, if you're a Unionist party, you should operate in the union.
Ben, there's a cleverness in what you just said there, and I didn't quite see it until you started speaking about it. But yes, they would actually take votes, and yes, there would be defections, as you just said, in England. But there's a bigger prize to be got in Scotland. I believe that Scotland is crying out for.
Okay, well, I hope you're right.
I do.
I hope you're right.
And I think that might be that would be a very clever move.
I mean,
there
is the Scottish Unionist Party, which hasn't had much traction, but maybe there could be some kind of cooperation there. The constituencies in Scotland seem to be drawn in a way to favour SNP. I can't really explain. When you've got 55% voting in favour of staying as part of the union, but you get such a vast majority of SNP MPs coming out of Scotland. Something's gone topsy-turvy in the electoral system. But the SNP, since we're having a kind of fireside chat, let's just talk about Scotland for a second. The SNP is a great Tory creation. The Tories love the existence of the SNP, and people are going to be thinking, why is Ben saying that? It's because it keeps Labour at bay, and that gives Tory control of the United Kingdom. So they've had this very unhealthy relationship, symbiotic relationship with the SNP. And, we've got to break that too. I think that's, look, there are challenges all over the place, but, we've got to bring unionism as an electoral threat to Great Britain. That's what we've got to do. Great Britain's kind of secular, with the exception of the SNP who want to break out. We're kind of secular on the union. We sort of take it for granted. We assume the United Kingdom is going to go forward. When you mention the word Northern Ireland, the phrase Northern Ireland Protocol, you can see people think, oh my goodness, that's such a legal thing. Oh, and they just glaze over. No one's really looking at the constitutional impact and what it means. But if you can export it from Northern Ireland and re-educate the United Kingdom about what unionism is and all the terrific values and policies that can be delivered through that prism, you know, I think the Tories will suddenly be waking up and thinking, oh my goodness, we better ditch that protocol. Let's put Sir Geoffrey back into Belfast.
So Ben, I've really two more things for to ask you, and then we'll close the stream. But would you just like to relate to the people on the live chat there? When is the deliberations from the Supreme Court judges? When do you think that might be coming available?
So we don't know. We don't know for sure, but it should be this month or next, is what I'm told.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to that. And then if you look at the bottom of the screen there, have they handed the keys to globalization, Ben? And we're referring to Rishi Sunak and co.
Yeah, look, so I don't believe in conspiracy theories. To believe in a conspiracy theory, you've got to actually also believe that our politicians are competent and, you know, that they can actually conspire at a global level. They can hardly run a party in number 10 properly, you know. So I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but I do firmly believe that people like Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak in particular, and loads of other politicians get their self-validation from their international peer group. What really is important to them is that Biden likes them, that Trudeau likes them, that you know, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, likes them, and they're all self-promoting this kind of you know, great reset, build back better. All of that comes out of that kind of self-validation that they get from each other. And there's another thing that's slightly more sinister than that going on, and it's this: that politicians recognize that the more that's left in the political sphere, the more they are controlled, the more democracy can be heard. And so they love what they call independent bodies. Of course, these independent bodies have no checks on them. They're deeply antagonistic to democracy. But the independent supranational bodies are the most threatening, because you can't elect them and you can't eject them from office. You don't elect them, you can't eject them from office. And once you've ceded power to them, for example, there's been chat about ceding a pandemic policy to the WHO. Once you've ceded that power to them, you can't take it back to the nation level state. So from that perspective, from the perspective that they like to dilute democracy, they like to dilute the opposition to their own policies, they like to create these independent bodies, these supranational bodies through which they can govern globally. And from this, the self-validation that they get on the global stage, from that perspective, absolutely, they're globalists. Johnson was a globalist. Boris Johnson was a supreme globalist. Net zero is one of the policies that's being delivered aggressively through the EU and these other supranational institutions. And it's deeply anti-democratic. And therefore, you've got to question Boris Johnson's credentials as a Brexiteer as well. But do I think there's a conspiracy? No. Do I think they're globalist? Absolutely. And they're increasingly handing democracy and control of the nation state over to other it's not just the EU, but the whole host of these institutions that exist.
Ben, thanks very much for that explanation. Thanks very much for coming along. And yeah, the stream was very, very interesting. And we will get a lot of clips out of that. I'll go to work this evening. I'm cutting up some clips. I'm just going to play people out with a song. And it's a song, a cover version of a song. And they call that song Don't Dream It's Over. And it talks about when the world comes in to drive a wedge between us or build a wall between us, we must never let them win. That's the theme of this music, Ben. So, Ben, thank you. And no doubt I will see you again in the very, very near future. Thanks very much, Ben.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, live chat. Thank you. Wrong one. I've done that before.
There is freedom within, there is freedom without. Try to catch a deluge in a paper cup. There's a battle ahead, many battles are lost, but you never see the end of the road while you're traveling with me. Hey now, don't dream it's over. Hey now, when the world comes in, they come to build a wall between us. You know that they won't win. Now I'm towing my car, there's a hole in the roof. My possessions are causing me suspicion, but there's no proof. In the paper today tells a warrant of waste, but you turn right over to the TV page. Hey now, don't dream it's over. Hey now, when the world comes in, they come to build a wall between us. You know that they won't win. Walking again to the beat of the drum, and I'm counting the steps to the door of your heart. Only shadows ahead, barely clearing the roof. Get to know the feeling of liberation and relief. Hey now,